Welcome to the Mini Book Podcast.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, and remember to subscribe so you can always get our latest, relevant book summaries on popular books.
Definitely helps keep you in the loop.
So today, we're going to immerse ourselves in some really fascinating ideas from Steven Pinker's book, How the Mind Works.
Right, this is a big one. Pinker really tries to synthesize cognitive science, evolutionary psychology, neuroscience. It's quite ambitious.
Absolutely. So let's start with something Pinker uses to hook you right in. We talk a lot about building robots. You see them everywhere in fiction, right? Like human-like robots.
Yes, C-3PO, Data, you name it.
Exactly. But where are the real ones? Why don't we have them yet? What's actually so hard about doing something that, say, a 4-year-old does without even thinking?
Yes. This is such a great point he makes. The gap between the robots we imagine and what we can actually build is, well, enormous.
It seems like we've done harder things.
You'd think so. I mean, we landed on the moon, we sequenced the human genome. Those seem like monumental achievements.
Right. Mind-bogglingly complex.
But Pinker argues, and it's a powerful argument, that the engineering problems humans solve constantly, every single second. Things like just seeing the world around you, walking across a cluttered room, planning how to get somewhere, or like your example, a 4-year-old understanding, bring me the teddy bear. These are vastly more complex engineering challenges.
More complex than landing on the moon. That's hard to grasp.
It really is counterintuitive. Because we do it so effortlessly, we assume it must be simple. But nature, through evolution, has packed incredible solutions into our minds for these everyday tasks. Solutions human engineers are, frankly, nowhere near replicating yet.
So just existing and interacting with the world is a marvel of engineering.
Precisely. And Pinker uses this to frame how we should think about the mind. He borrows an idea from Noam Chomsky about ignorance, splitting it into problems and mysteries.
Okay, what's the difference?
Well, a mystery is something that just leaves you baffled. You don't even know where to start, what an explanation would even look like. Think about consciousness, maybe, for some people.
Right. That, wow.
But a problem? Well, you don't have the answer yet, but you have some clues. You have growing knowledge, maybe some theories, an idea of the kind of answer you're looking for.
And the good news?
The good news is that many things about the mind that used to seem like total mysteries, how we make mental images, memory, even falling in love, are now increasingly being seen as problems. Hard problems, definitely, but problems we can actually start to tackle scientifically.
So the lesson here is really about appreciating the sheer complexity hidden in our ordinary mental lives, and that understanding the mind is moving from just being mystified to actually trying to solve these incredibly sophisticated design problems nature has already cracked.
Exactly. We take it all for granted, but it's fantastic stuff.
Okay, that naturally leads to another big question. How can something like a thought, a belief or a desire, which feels so abstract, so non-physical, how can it actually cause you to do something physical, like deciding to get a coffee and then actually walking to the kitchen?
The mind-body problem, essentially. Yeah, how does the ghost in the machine pull the levers, beliefs, and desires? They don't have color or smell or weight.
Right, so how can they push your muscles around? It's not like billiard balls hitting each other.
It seems paradoxical. But this is where the computational theory of mind comes in. It's a central idea for Pinker. It offers a way out of the paradox.
Okay, how does that work?
The core idea is that beliefs and desires are physical things. They are information.
Information.
Yes. Specifically, they are configurations of symbols. And these symbols are physically represented in your brain, maybe as patterns of neural firing or connections between neurons, like patterns on a silicon chip.
So my wanting coffee isn't just a feeling, it's a specific physical pattern in my brain.
That's the idea. That pattern symbolizes your desire for coffee. And because these symbols are physical states, they can cause other things to happen. They get triggered by your senses, seeing the coffee maker, maybe, and they interact logically with other symbols, other physical patterns representing your other beliefs, like the coffee's in the kitchen. These interactions follow rules, like computation, leading to new symbols, new physical states that might represent, I should walk to the kitchen.
And eventually that chain reaction connects to the nerves controlling my leg muscles.
Exactly. The physical symbol processing cascade eventually triggers the motor output. So the seemingly intangible thought causes a physical action because the thought itself is instantiated as a physical pattern undergoing computation. Meaning causes things to happen because meaning is carried by physical states.
It grounds thought in the physical world.
Precisely. It lets us talk meaningfully about beliefs and desires causing behavior without resorting to anything spooky. It's about the pattern, the logic, the software running on the brain's hardware. Neuroscientists can look at brain tissue, but understanding the mind requires understanding the intricate logic and connectivity, the program being run.
Like knowing the alphabet doesn't mean you understand the novel. The meaning is in the pattern of the letters.
Perfect analogy. And Pinker argues the mind isn't just one big general processor, but it's made up of many specialized modules, like different software programs, each evolved to handle specific tasks: vision, language, social reasoning, and so on. And the basic logic of these modules, it's largely innate, specified genetically thanks to our evolutionary past.
Just pausing here for a second, if you're finding these ideas about how the mind works interesting, and you want to keep getting summaries like this on important books, we'd really appreciate it if you took just a moment to like this recording and subscribe to the Mini Book Podcast.
Yeah, it really helps us keep bringing you this kind of content, keeping things up to date and relevant. So just a quick click makes a big difference. Thanks.
Okay, back to it. So, computation and modules. Let's talk about perception, specifically vision. It feels so direct, right? You open your eyes, and there's the world.
Seems simple. Deceptively simple.
But think about this. Why do you get totally sucked into a movie or a TV show? You know it's just a flat screen spitting out light. But you see depth, people, places. It feels real. Why?
Illusions. They tell us so much. This happens because your visual system isn't just passively recording light like a camera. It's actively constructing your reality based on built-in assumptions about how the world usually works.
Assumptions.
Yes, assumptions hardwired by evolution. For example, the part of your visual system dealing with surfaces have to figure out an object's true color and texture, separating that from the effects of the lighting shining on it. That's a really hard problem.
How does it solve it?
By making assumptions. A key one is assuming that the illumination, the light source, is generally uniform across the scene.
Okay. But on a TV screen, the light isn't uniform. It's coming from the pixels themselves.
Exactly. So the assumption is violated. And your visual system, running its ancient program based on how light works in the natural world, gets fooled. It interprets the patterns of light on the flat screen as indicating real depths, real surfaces, real objects that aren't actually there. It's essentially seduced into hallucinating objects.
Even though consciously I know it's just a screen, my visual system doesn't learn.
Nope. That underlying assumption, that evolved cheat sheet about uniform lighting, is too deep-seated. It keeps generating the illusion. Vision doesn't just pass raw data up the chain. It delivers a process description to the rest of your mind. There's a chair over there. That person is moving towards you.
And creating that 3D description uses other tricks too, right? Like having two eyes.
Absolutely. Binocular parallax, each eye gets a slightly different view. Your brain brilliantly compares these two views, solves the correspondence problem, figuring out which bit in the left eye image matches which bit in the right, and uses the difference to calculate depth. It's complex computation happening instantly.
Wow. What else?
Shape from shading is another one. Your brain assumes surfaces generally have uniform lightness or color. So variations in brightness are interpreted as changes in shape due to how light falls on curves and angles.
But that could be fooled too.
Oh, yeah. Think about animal camouflage, like countershading darker on top, lighter below. This cancels out the natural effect of light coming from above, making the animal look flatter and harder to see. Or even makeup. Contouring uses darker and lighter shades to trick the shape from shading system into seeing different facial structures.
So the lesson is perception isn't just seeing what's there. It's this active, complex process using evolved modules with built-in assumptions. And these assumptions, while usually helpful, make us susceptible to illusions, especially in artificial environments like watching TV. It's not a clear window, it's an interpretation engine.
Well put, an incredibly sophisticated interpretation engine.
Okay, let's shift from seeing to thinking itself. How does the mind store and process information? Here's something we all experience. You read a book or an article. Later you remember the main points, the ideas, the gist of it.
I heard the content.
Right. But you probably forget the exact wording, the specific sentences. You definitely don't remember what font it was in or where on the page a certain sentence was. How does your mind separate the meaning, the essence, from the specific form it came in?
This really highlights that the mind uses different kinds of mental representations, different formats for storing knowledge. Your understanding isn't just tied to the physical shape of letters or the sounds of words.
How do we know?
Well, think about recognizing the word table. You recognize it whether it's printed in Times New Roman, handwritten, or spoken aloud. If your knowledge was just a stored picture of the letters T-A-B-L-E, you'd struggle with different fonts or handwriting.
Right, so there must be something more abstract.
Exactly. There's an abstract entry in your mental dictionary for a table that's neutral about its physical form. Psychologists like Michael Posner showed this experimentally. People are faster to identify two letters as being the same if they look identical, like BB or B, compared to when they're the same letter but different case, like Beeb or BB.
Suggesting there's a quick visual match level, but also a slower, more abstract identity level.
Precisely. So we have visual forms, abstract symbols for words. We also represent grammatical structure, nouns, verbs, how sentences are built. But crucially, Pinker talks about mentalese.
The language of thought.
Yes. This is proposed as the internal medium where the actual propositional content, the meaning, the concepts are represented. When you read that article, you translate the sentences into mentalese propositions, and that's what you store in memory long-term, stripping away the specific wording.
So mentalese is how different parts of the mind can talk to each other. Like vision identifies an object and tells the decision-making part about it using mentalese.
That's the idea. It's the mind's lingua franca. The parts of your brain dealing with memory or reasoning don't get the raw pixel data from your eyes or the raw sound waves from your ears. They get highly processed input symbols representing objects, concepts, relationships, coded in mentalese.
It's like getting the executive summary, not the raw data dump.
Exactly. And we use other representations too. Mental images, for instance. We can manipulate these almost like analog computers. If I ask you which is bigger, a mouse or an elephant, you might conjure up images and compare them spatially.
Yeah, I can picture that.
And even ambiguous figures like that classic duck-rabbit picture. The fact that you can see it as a duck or a rabbit shows your mind stores more than just a single label. It retains geometric information that allows for multiple interpretations in mentalese.
Okay, so the lesson is our minds are really sophisticated in how they handle information, using multiple formats, visual patterns, abstract symbols, grammar, and this underlying language of thought, mentalese, which captures meaning and allows different brain systems to communicate. It's not just one simple storage system.
Not at all. It's a multi-format, highly structured system.
Let's connect this back to behavior and evolution. Why do we do the things we do? Think about basic preferences. Why do you like sleeping on a soft bed instead of a hard floor? Or prefer, say, champagne to pond water? Is that always a logical calculation? Like, this bed offers optimal spinal support, maximizing my REM sleep?
Probably not consciously, no. This brings in William James, the great psychologist Pinker often references. James argued that we do countless things not because we've calculated their utility or survival value, but simply because they feel like the only appropriate and natural thing to do.
It just feels right.
Exactly. Seeking warmth when you're cold, preferring certain tastes, even something like facing into a room rather than towards the wall. James suggested these are driven by innate tendencies, instincts if you like. We follow them because they feel good or seem obvious.
But they probably are useful from an evolutionary standpoint, right? A soft bed is better for rest. Champagne is safer than potentially contaminated pond water.
Oh, absolutely. Science can often figure out the ultimate evolutionary advantage. But James's point, and Pinker echoes this, is that the proximate reason, the psychological reason you do it in the moment, isn't that calculation. It's the feeling, the preference itself. That's the mechanism evolution built.
So it's not pure rationality driving everything.
Not necessarily. James even called language an instinct to acquire an art, suggesting even complex skills can feel like natural inclinations. Pinker suggests human flexibility doesn't come from one giant all-purpose rational brain, but from having scores, maybe hundreds, of these specialized instincts and preferences evolved for different situations that get assembled into programs and pitted in competitions to guide our behavior.
So the lesson is, much of our behavior is driven by these evolved ingrained tendencies that feel natural or desirable, rather than being the result of conscious, rational deliberation about utility. The utility might be there evolutionarily, but it's not always why it feels right to us.
Right. The feeling is the evolutionary mechanism at work.
Taking that evolutionary lens deeper into human relationships really brings up some, well, provocative ideas. For instance, think about marriage practices across cultures. Why are things like dowries or bride prices so common?
Yeah, where wealth exchanges hands when people marry.
Or why do some societies have really specific rules about marrying cousins? Sometimes encouraging marriage between certain types of cousins, like children of a brother and a sister, but forbidding marriage between others, like children of two sisters.
From the evolutionary psychology perspective Pinker presents, these seemingly complex social rules can often be understood through the logic of genes, relatedness, and alliances. Dowries and bride prices, for instance, can be seen as signals of commitment and investment between families or larger kin groups who are essentially exchanging reproductive potential.
Like a guarantee or a sign of good faith in this genetic partnership.
Sort of, yeah. It solidifies the alliance, creates shared interests in the success of the marriage and the resulting offspring. The rules about cousin marriage often relate to managing these alliances over generations. Marrying a cross-cousin might reinforce a long-standing exchange relationship between two clans, whereas rules about parallel cousins might relate to keeping resources within a lineage or avoiding certain complications depending on how descent is traced. It's about the strategic flow of genes and resources.
And this logic doesn't just apply between families, but within them too, even causing conflict.
Oh, definitely. Parent-offspring conflict is a key concept. While parents and children share 50% of their genes, that other 50% is different, leading to potential conflicts of genetic interest.
Like weaning.
Weaning is a classic example. The mother might be better off genetically speaking, stopping nursing sooner to save resources for future children. But the current child is better off getting those resources for longer. Their genetic interests diverge slightly, leading to conflict.
Wow. And the book tackles even darker aspects through this lens.
It does. It discusses historical data on infanticide, for example, which is obviously a deeply disturbing topic. But the analysis looks at correlations rates were historically higher when infants had factors drastically reducing survival odds, like severe deformities, being a twin in a resource-poor environment, or having no identified father for support.
So the argument is, from a harsh evolutionary perspective, it reflected impossible choices about maximizing the chances of any genes getting passed on.
That's the interpretation offered, yes. Not a moral justification, but an attempt to understand historical patterns through the lens of reproductive trade-offs under extreme duress. Similarly, things like patterns of jealousy, why people are statistically less likely to kill close genetic relatives, or why young males might engage in more risky behavior. These are also analyzed in terms of maximizing reproductive success or navigating conflicts over resources and mates shaped by evolutionary logic.
So the lesson is that evolutionary pressures have profoundly shaped our family structures, our relationships, even our conflicts. Many complex social behaviors can be illuminated, sometimes uncomfortably, by considering the underlying drive to maximize gene transmission, which can create inherent conflicts of interest even among loved ones.
It's a powerful and sometimes unsettling perspective on human nature.
Okay, final segment. This is a big one. If evolution is fundamentally about survival and reproduction, passing on genes, why do we spend so much time on stuff that seems totally useless for that? Art, music, telling jokes, religion, philosophy.
Right. What's the evolutionary payoff for writing a symphony or debating the nature of reality? These are universal human activities, telling stories, singing, dancing, decorating, rituals, wondering about luck and the supernatural. We often think of them as the highest expressions of humanity.
But they don't obviously put food on the table or help you find a mate, do they?
Not directly, no. So how could evolution produce a mind that cares so deeply about these things? Pinker discusses a few possibilities. One major idea is that they might be byproducts of other adaptations.
Byproducts. Like side effects.
Sort of. Maybe these activities tap into our brain's pleasure circuits in ways that didn't necessarily require direct fitness benefit themselves. Think of that rat pressing a lever for brain stimulation. It found a shortcut to pleasure that bypassed the normal routes of food or sex.
So art or music might be like pressing our own pleasure buttons.
That's one possibility. Maybe music hijacks systems evolved for understanding auditory scenes or emotional calls. Maybe fiction and storytelling exercise our social cognition modules, letting us simulate complex social scenarios safely. Humor might be the pleasurable feeling we get when our minds resolve an incongruity or a cognitive puzzle.
Okay, that makes some sense for arts and humor. What about religion and philosophy? The big questions.
Those might arise because our evolved cognitive tools, designed for dealing with the everyday world of objects and people, are being applied to questions they weren't originally built to handle. Questions about origins, meaning, mortality. Our minds try to find answers using the reasoning and social intelligence modules we have, perhaps leading to concepts of gods, spirits, or abstract principles.
So we're using tools designed for fixing leaky huts to try and understand the cosmos.
That's a decent analogy, yeah. Our minds might be trying to make sense of things that are fundamentally beyond the scope of their evolved design specs.
So the lesson here is that these seemingly pointless but deeply human activities might not be direct adaptations themselves, but rather interesting side effects or exploitations of mental systems that did evolve for survival and reproduction. They could be tapping into pleasure systems or represent our cognitive machinery, grappling with questions beyond its original purpose, highlighting the sheer complexity and maybe even the surplus's creativity of the human mind.
It suggests our minds are capable of far more than just the basics needed to survive and reproduce.
Well, this has been a really rich immersion into the ideas from your sources on Pinker's How the Mind Works. We've touched on the hidden complexity of everyday thought. The mind as a computational system, the constructed nature of perception, the different ways we represent knowledge, the role of instinct, the evolutionary roots of family dynamics, and potential explanations for art and philosophy.
It really is a comprehensive way of looking at who we are, grounding our psychology and biology and evolution.
So, after all this exploration, the mind as this evolved computer running ancient programs that shape how we see, feel, relate, and even create. Here's a final thought to leave you with. If so much of our mental life is shaped by these deep, evolved structures and instincts, how much conscious control do we really have over the program? When you make a choice or feel an emotion or create something new, how much is you deciding and how much is the unfolding of this incredibly sophisticated, evolved blueprint?
Definitely something to think about.
Indeed. This is the end of the podcast.
As always, thank you for listening.
And please subscribe if you haven't already. The ideas we discussed today come from Steven Pinker's book, How the Mind Works.
It's a dense but rewarding read. We definitely encourage you to purchase the book to immerse yourself deeper in these fascinating topics.
You can check the description below for more information on the book.
Thank you for listening to the Mini Book Podcast.
See you next time.